Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, beautiful souls. Welcome to A Touch of Grace. Now, when I say beautiful souls, I mean beautiful souls around the globe, because people have been tuning in and listening to the recorded broadcast from all around the world. So I just want to say thank you so much. And there's so much going on in the various countries. I am humbled. And I hope that you take something away that could comfort you if you're in a very, bad area right now. Love you. It is the first day of spring, 2024. An equinox where vibrant green foliage and colorful flowers awaken from their winter slumber. Today, let's focus on nature's majestic glory, as opposed to all the ills taking place around the globe, and leave all our anxieties on the higher power's to-do list as we focus on living our best. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 7 of A Touch of Grace. Now, I had more to say, and I'm not sure really what happened to my verbiage. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, here it is here. Today's guest has not only been a gracious spirit in my cyber presence, she has also been a beautiful spirit that I live my life vicariously through. She is both an accomplished pianist as well as an amazing performance artist who blends her musical prowess with nature's powerful pulse. Now, I'm not sure why I'm getting so tongue-tied today because I had all that rehearsed, but it's live and we make it do what we do. Okay, so just a little bit about this. Now, this is something else that I've also practiced reading. It's a little intro about today's diva, Mary Edwards. She's a composer and environmental sound artist whose interdisciplinary practice encompasses themes of temporality, impermanence, nostalgia, and the natural world that recur throughout her work. She is interested in the invisible architecture and the emotive, historic, cinematic, and spatial properties of sound. Listening is an inherent and integral part of her process in conveying how all sounds have the potential to be habitual and can be transformative once you get inside them, as they are simultaneously intimate and immense. Now, that's from her website. I did not write that, but today's guest is Mary Edwards, and I'm going to welcome her to the show. Let me go ahead and open this mic up. Hey, Mary, so that was a mouthful. I had to practice what you wrote, because I'm like, spatial? I never even heard of that. I don't even know if I pronounced it right.
That's all right. When I heard you say that, I said, I'm going to redefine spatial and call it spatial, because it is. And you thought it was a mouthful for you. People say, what do you do? What is it that you do, for your life's work? And I say, trying to simplify the definition of what I do, and that is not it.
Girl, let me tell you something. When you were on the show a few years ago, your definition and how you, describe what you do, I was trying to keep up with you. So, promise me today that you'll put it in layman's terms. So
yes,
I'll understand.
I promise. I solemnly swear.
You are incredible. So what have you been? Before we start, let me go ahead and say that our divas. The last time we spoke, our divas were here. Mama Jewel and
That's right.
Mama
they were
Diva
on
Phyllis.
Earth.
Yeah, they were on Earth, and
they were on Earth, and so they are now on assignment out in the stratosphere, and they're here too, but they're, that's the beauty of the cycle, right? I don't like to think of it in terms of like death being its own entity. I think of it as an extension or part of the life cycle. I am very, of course, I'm sad every day that like I can't call my mom in the manner in which I spoke to her daily, right. and reach out, and like it's been like somewhat treacherous as of late, like, I want to share things, even when I just want to have mundane conversations. My mom, hearing her voice, she's a bright light, and I tend to emulate her a lot in terms of, like, her speaking voice when I'm, just trying to get through my day. And I don't know if you ever heard my mom speak, but she had a very sing-songy morning doorbell, have some coffee kind of voice. She was a beautiful lady. And I saw your mom, and I didn't get the pleasure of meeting your mom, and I don't think I've ever heard a soundbite of your mom, but I can only imagine that the two of them right now doing the thing in heaven right now, or just all around.
Okay, check this out real quick. Hold on a second. Check this out. Let me see if it'll play for me. I guess it's being stubborn. It won't play. I was going to try to play you a soundbite from her, but sometimes Blog Talk Radio resets. But anyway, yeah, they were both wonderful women, and I loved how you doted on her, and, you spoke so wonderful of her because their spirits were so powerful. And I know that my mother, I don't feel her presence as much as I did in the past few months. She was so live and vibrant during the Super Bowl game because ladybugs were everywhere, but I'm thinking so I think I'm doing what she wants me to do as far as keeping the lines of communication open with the family. But let's dive into you now that we have paid homage to our maternal loves. What have you been up to? I guess the first thing that I'm going to say, I looked at a picture of you. All I saw was ice. Where in the hell were you at, girl?
I was in the northernmost humanly habitable place on Earth called Svalbard, which is a Norwegian territory that is located smack dab between the northernmost point of mainland Norway and the North Pole. And it has a surprisingly to me, I didn't know what to expect when I embarked on this expedition, but I was happy to discover that I ended up in a place, I was sailing around this very place, but on land, I was staying in Longyearbyen, which, in addition to its second northernmost city, Nalesund, these two places are where you can find a lot of the Arctic geology research stations and educational centers. There's a lot of good stuff happening up there, but it's not a place that one can get to easily for the reason that you have to go through mainland Norway to get there. It's not a place. You can't book a ticket from the United States, or I don't think really anywhere else in the world but Norway because of territorial province. But it is an amazing place, and the way I got there. Do you want the story from the beginning?
Hell yeah. And I'm so glad you asked because I'm like sitting here glued.
Well, I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version, but I'm dating myself because when I was a kid, we used to have the subscription to the Reader's Digest, which meant you had. Oh, honey, these wonderful little tomes that came monthly. They were, larger than pockets. They were like the same dimensions almost of Jet magazines, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So they were, you could put them in your pocket, you could put them in your purse, and they were chock full of really
pictures.
Beautiful pictures, right? And so speaking of beautiful pictures, the story begins where I've always been adventurous, and I always craved a peripatetic life. I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to move around. I would get excited about car rides to the supermarket. I mean, that's the kind of kid I was. I could never be still in my mind, if not in the bodily form. And my parents really, they did the best they could to get us outdoors, get us into nature. We went camping a lot. We visited family in Georgia a lot. So we were, we stayed in both, sort of updated contemporary areas. We also stayed a lot in the country where my grandmother lived. And so, I'd always been one with nature, but I loved the idea of going to, different climates. And back then we had real winters. I mean, being from New York, we had 4 seasons. And now we have this odd melding and sampling, sort of like a buffet of climate now. But, so that sort of leads into the work that I do, is sort of looking at the world through this lens of what once was and what is now. So moving up to around my early pubescence, I guess you could say around 12, going on 13. I was one of those nerds that, while all the kids were asking for their birthdays, they wanted, bicycles and, Lacoste shirts and, all these material things. But can I have a subscription to National Geographic? Because we had gotten an issue or two from a family friend he had a subscription. He would give us, he would give us a couple of magazines and say, oh, I'm done with these. You kids want to look at them. And, of course, I was always fascinated with them. And when my parents did grant me, the subscription, when the first issue came in, it was about the Arctic. And it was about the Arctic in general, because the Arctic can be anything. If you look at the globe, start from the equator, work your way up to the 78th parallel, going, say, towards the North Pole. When things start getting really cold, you're looking at anywhere on that circle. The Arctic Circle is not a massive land. It encompasses the North American Arctic, so that could be Alaska, that could be Canada, anything that touches that 78th parallel, Russia, and Finland, Iceland, Greenland, Norway. And I was reading about, I think primarily about Canada, but I was also looking at this one image that really grabbed me. And, it mesmerized me. It was an aerial shot, probably taken from a helicopter, of a group of scientists in a Zodiac boat. Now, the Zodiac boats are like those black dinghies that can navigate the seas and the delicate edges of any land, seeing is that it's not really safe for a larger ship to anchor onto these shores because, they'll erode. So these smaller black boats that go around can, really get into the nooks and nuances of the land. And so if you're exploring certain things, if you're perhaps an oceanographer or a geologist, whatever your background is, you can really get in there and you can be that much closer to the water. And it was just a sort of like a vague shot of a group of these scientists wearing their bright orange vests. And somehow I just imagined myself in that boat. And I thought, how do I get in that boat? How can I join them? How can I be one with this scene here? I was very much into science at the time and art. And I was things were starting to get educationally complicated for me, because at that point, as I was going off into junior high school, probably already in junior high school, I was finding the sciences challenging, the very thing that I embraced, and always thought I could see my life, as a scientist / artist. I didn't know what that shape would be exactly, but I saw myself kind of, things were going adrift with the scientific end of things because of mathematics being increasingly complicated. And I got through it, but it didn't come as easy for me. And I started to think, in this polarity, I don't know how I'm ever going to get to the Arctic if I can't excel in sciences. And I don't know why I thought like that. I didn't have this talk with my parents about it. I didn't speak outwardly to anyone about it. So it wasn't that I wasn't encouraged. My parents were very big proponents on, keep pursuing education, keep pursuing what it is you want to do. They actually wanted to send me to art school, so they weren't against it. They felt that they were probably more advanced, and that they knew that arts are integrative and not separate. But somehow I think I had a lot of fear about that. And so keeping this image in mind, I held on to the dream, but I just didn't know how it was going to happen. And I don't know why, again, I thought that way. So moving, a couple of decades ahead, I was reading an article in the New York Times one Sunday, and they were doing a profile on a watercolor artist named Lisa Gorin, I believe that's her last name, and she had gone around the world on various residencies to depict ice as it needs to be seen, which is ice is not this white or translucent or transparent mass, but in fact it holds a lot of color. And so her paintings are just exquisite. They're beautiful, they're detailed, and they show the Arctic in that manner. You know, it honors the ice, if you will. And I'm looking at this article. I saw a photo of her sort of turning around, smiling to the camera, and almost like this, like sly grin, like, look at me, I'm on a ship in the Arctic. And I went, wait a minute, she is an artist on a ship in the Arctic. What is this? What is this freshness? So I looked it up, and I saw that there was a residency called the Arctic Circle, as in the Arctic Circle residency, and involved taking a good amount of time to dedicate yourself to being there, but you had to get in first. Very competitive, and while they subsidize it, you still have to lay out, money for getting your gear and everything like that. And at that point in my life, this was around the time that I met you for the first time. So I was looking into, as a sound artist, what is this going to involve? I've always wanted to go to the Arctic, and here's a possible chance to do it. And so I waited a bit, and I waited until that convergence of, sometimes we have time and no money, sometimes we have money and no time. But
exactly.
when that moment struck, there was no looking back for me. And I applied. I got shortlisted. I was excited about that, but I was even more thrilled when I got the letter of acceptance that I would go in. Now, of course, this happening at the top of 2020, within the month of acceptance was also the big kibosh on everything across the board, that things would shut down, and that our chance to finally go to the Arctic meant they would have to wait until things cleared up. So when I should have gone in October of 2020, I ended up going in October of 2022. So it was a 2-year wait upon acceptance. But I was thrilled nonetheless, and I shared a lot about it, and, so let people sort of peek into the process of how I was going to get there and my dreams about it. And it generated a lot of excitement. But when I was having quiet time to myself, I'd say, wow, look, you've got, the dream coming true. You're going to be in that Zodiac boat, exploring things, as soon as things clear up. And when I got there, I went with the intent, and I went sort of tabula rasa. I knew at the baseline that I wanted to compose a piece about the Arctic, but I wasn't sure what that would sound like. So I went with a blank slate. I thought about this watercolor artist, Lisa Gorin, and I said, I want to go and debunk this myth that things are not as quiet as one might imagine the Arctic to be if they've never been there, like myself. I want to debunk the myth that it is, all like white or / colorless, or that it's a very cold place and there's not much else to it. It is a place that is rich in color. It is rich in sound, even when you are in the seemingly most remote place. And the undercurrent, or there's a number of through lines that I started developing about the narrative around this piece. And one of them is touching upon this idea of climate change and what that might mean. But because climate change is such a broad topic, no two people at the same time are going to be talking about climate change in the same chronological frame. I think if I start a conversation with you, I might be talking about what's gone on in the last month. You might say, well, what's gone on in the last 100 years? So it's a difficult conversation to harness unless we're knowledgeable and really willing to focus on it. So speaking of layman's terms, I wanted to introduce this idea that the Arctic is transforming no matter what. However, yes, we are responsible for climate change. So perhaps we can open up the conversation to sustainability where we are, and to not look to the other for the solution, and how can we each participate in taking care of ourselves in a time where things are rapidly changing. The Arctic is a pinpoint because the glaciers are so majestic and yet so fragile, and that they are melting at a clip, and that was part of the sound that I gathered was surprisingly the rapidity of how often these things would calve right before my very ears. Mm-hmm. So that's the long story, like how, where it began, how I got there. And as someone who had been writing music, I sort of wanted to collaborate, as I've done in the past, with rivers and the ocean, and with much smaller mountains like Mount Tamalpais, where you live in California. I wanted to have this sort of dialogue, if you will, or listen to the dialogue that's taking place where I, in the different places where I went in and around Svalbard, to then respond to it by gathering the sound and recreating musically, sonically, and incorporating the actual field sounds into a composition. And I'll just make one last note to say that when I was on the expedition, one of my colleagues said to me, "So what are you working on?" And I told him, and this was way at the very beginning, like I was just starting to gather things. I really didn't have a whole lot amassed at that point. And he said, "Oh, so you're writing an elegy." And I was trying to keep a poker face, but I must have frowned, and I didn't want to, chomp at him, but I'm not writing an elegy, I'm writing an ode. I want to accentuate the beauty of what's happening. I know that it's not to dismiss by any means what's happening environmentally. It's a very serious matter, and yet if we can, be in the now and embrace the beauty and the temporality of what's happening, and it's not an or, and consider what we can do, what part can we take, what role can we take in sustainability.
I'm glad you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Because this is just so fascinating to me. You remind me of Bob Ross, because that's my little meditative guy where I put on headphones and I just, listen to him talk. But I like that part where you alluded to the fact of when that guy asked you if it was an elegy, and you said, no, it's an ode, and it's not to acknowledge what's going on around, but to just kind of be in the moment. And the thing is, from a mental health perspective, because there is so much going on in the world, you laid it out right then and there when you said that you just want to be in that moment, because when we try to take in too much of what's going on, then it's just kind of an overload. So I just wanted to kind of interject and add my little two pieces in there.
No, I appreciate that thought, because that's exactly it, is that we are on overload. We're I think culturally, and there's this trend that we all want our voices to be important, and everyone is striving to be heard, and it's important to be heard, whether it's an individual, personal issue, or how we participate in our communities, or where we see ourselves in the world. And these are big things. Even the personal stuff, even the stuff that we sort of keep close to our chest, it's big things. And this plays on the overall theme of a lot of my work, which is intimate immensity, how one can feel the largesse in an intimate setting, or one can feel the intimacy in a large setting, right? And when I'm standing before these magnificent glaciers, it's like, that's church for me. I mean, nature has always been my church. I was raised Episcopalian, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, this is nature right here. I can't contest.
I can identify. I definitely do.
Right. It's a beautiful thing to listen. It's a important thing to listen.
And to take in. To take in, to look, and like you said, those glaciers, I had to postpone my Alaska trip because of financial situation thing that I have to work through some things. But I went on ahead and had the deposit transferred to May 4th of next year. Of course, I wanted to do it at 62, but I'm going to be doing it closer to 63. And it is a spiritual journey for me. I was going to go with some friends. I think they're going to still go in August, but the intention was me doing it by myself. And it looks to me like that is what the higher power had planned. So I'm just looking forward to it. And I'm hoping that I might be able to see the auroras and the whatever is there as far as the glaciers. Were you able to see the auroras where you were?
Oh my goodness. The first time that I was able to see it. Now, we were at sea for a number of weeks before we had internet. And we were told ahead of time to be prepared. We're not going to be, the ship it's a floating lab, and we're going to be near other laboratories, and at some point we may pick up some internet access, but we're there to sort of focus on our work, and every day we try to make landing in some fjord at some glacier, and we were able to do quite a number of them given the time of year that we sail, because that's going to open up a whole other conversation about that time of year being we entered the polar night. The polar night is not a singular 24 hours. The polar night is 3 months of darkness. So we were just at the tip of the polar night, which meant our days were getting increasingly short, which meant that we had to get up very early, get dressed. There's only, 27 of us plus the crew. And we had to get up very early, get into climb down off the ship into these Zodiac boats with our bright orange vests and go out and explore. And that meant, with the sound artist, it meant me bringing my recording equipment. There were painters there that did some really gorgeous paintings. There were writers there that were documenting. They wanted sort of the immersive Arctic experience so that they could transfer it into a historical novel. There were photographers there. There were architects there who were, learning about sustainability and texture and materials. And it's great to be around so many different types of artists because we inform each other. But to get back to your question about the Aurora Borealis, yes. As night set in, we had these beautiful star-filled skies, and at one point, we were so used to and accustomed to not having the internet. Everyone was talking with each other, just like the old days. It was great. We'd have these wonderful, wonderful meals. And one night, really, all of a sudden, after dinner, I look around, and I'm like, where the hell is everybody? And I see a few people sitting in the gallery, and they're looking down at their phones. I'm like, what is this? And then I look outside on the deck, and everyone is inside of the hut on the deck getting their internet access for the first time in weeks. And so we're all reaching out to our loved ones, like, hi, everybody. And all of a sudden, then the deck clears, and everyone's on the side of the ship looking up. And that same moment, and I say this because it's so profound, that while we're so hungry for connection via the internet and for each other, we're also hungry for natural phenomena. All of a sudden, it went from this everybody looking down at their phones, everybody looking up in the sky. Look, it's the Aurora Borealis, and it was so rich and so wide, and these beautiful green, like almost intergalactic space age things streaking across the sky with hints of orange around it.
Oh my God!
Sky. Well, the sky wasn't pitch black, but it was dark enough to draw out those colors. And I thought, my goodness, here it is. What a juxtaposition, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first time, and then after that, we were treated to that site fairly regularly throughout the rest of the journey. And then even on land, when I got back to mainland Norway, I stayed in Tromsø for a couple of days to go visit the Arctic Cathedral, and that's a place I'd love to do a piece one day. It's a magnificent cathedral. I stayed kind of across the river from there, so you could walk there over the bridge. And to look up at the sky on mainland and look at the streaks kind of everywhere. I mean, that's the clarity that the sky offered for us to see that. We could never see anything like that here in New York.
Oh, my God. I'm just, as you are talking, I am so immersed in my mind and the imagery and, just, wow, what an experience. And, being up there, how cold did it get?
It got pretty cold. However, I've said this before, and I pulled this quote from a friend of mine who has been to Alaska. Matter of fact, she was someone who I met on this expedition. Her name is Leslie Sobel, and she has gone to Alaska a number of times. She's from Wisconsin. She said, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's bad clothing. So it got cold. It got really cold. However, I learned my lessons early before I went, which is layer. Layer in merino wool. Do not wear cotton because you will sweat, and that sweat will freeze, and you'll be crying.
Right.
Layer your clothes. Park is not a bad idea, but I got away. I think me and a number of people got away without, a big fancy parka, because there are times where you do get warm, and the ship was really toasty. I mean, it's very well accommodated. They give you 3 meals a day, actually sometimes upwards of 4 meals a day.
Wow.
They're very rich and fat, and you say to yourself, oh, how on earth am I going to, as time goes on, how am I going to get into these clothes? I'm just about clearing the waistband now. But I lost 8 pounds. I lost 8 pounds in a month because it's good fat, and you're burning it off. You're working. You're hoisting cells. You're climbing up and down ladders every day.
Holy
climbing
crap!
Up and down.
It was pretty interactive then. You weren't just sitting there and somebody else was doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, no, we had an actual crew with us, but you automatically become part of the crew. Nothing's mandatory, but it's part of the learning experience of being on this 3-mast barkentine, which is a wooden ship built in 1957. It is, I don't know, it's like, it's a couple of 100 feet long. It's not a big boat. It's not an icebreaker. And the overall gist of this is an artist residency, so we're not on a pleasure cruise. So the fanciest thing that's afforded to us are these really exquisite meals.
Okay.
But you're working. You're working at what you do because it is a residency. You're working at your craft, figuring out what it is that you want to convey with your with your art. Like I said, there's a number of artists up there working on various and assorted projects. And it seemed like there was that common denominator getting back to this idea of, elegy versus ode. There were so many people there who were at once in awe and in tears almost daily, not because they were in awe, but because they were devastated at what's happening to the earth and what they had heard. And now they're getting to witness it.
I got chill bumps, and I'm speechless because I guess this is what, and I'm not going to dive into this political thing. I guess that is what I'm most annoyed about.
Let's talk about it. Let's dive a little bit.
Okay, a little off the subject.
Let's dip our toes in the water, if we will, right?
Okay,
because it's important to get there.
Just a smidgen, but there was this movie that I remember when I was in my addiction, and I was living in the cottage next to the drug dealer, and one night I watched this movie called The Day After Tomorrow. And and I immersed myself in it, and it was about global climate. There were tornadoes in Los Angeles, and just a few weeks ago there were tornadoes here. And so and I don't know that movie was so far off, but it was fascinating, and it makes me frustrated, and angry that the world leaders are so busy focusing on other stuff, and this goddamn planet is in peril.
You know, Glenn, a lot of these movies, like The Day After, are incredibly prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't, you know, I have to refrain from using the word incredible, because when you break it down, it sounds like it's not believed. I'll say amazingly prophetic, profoundly prophetic. They ain't lying, right? It was sort of a roadmap. I mean, even like reading a book like 1984, which, you know, oddly enough, my beautiful and brilliant and wry, witty third grade teacher, who years later became my friend, may she rest in peace. We lost her a little over a year ago.
Oh.
But she assigned us 1984, and because she knew we could read at that level.
Mm-hmm.
This is third grade, and I remember reading it back in, we're going on 1975, so we're going on 50 years ago, and that book just, you know, oh, it seems cute, Animal Farm. The animals are talking to each other. It's like, no, it's like an apocalyptic Charlotte's Web.
Mm.
You know? And,
oh, wow, I'll never forget that one.
And that book, you know, that was the beginning of, you know, because, you know, at that time, there was all that talk about, you know, what does the future look like? It's not far off from you. What does it look like? And when we think about timelines, is there really a timeline, or is this cycle?
Right.
Just like we were talking earlier about death not being a separate entity, that it's part of a cycle. And so I've been, you know, I think I learned early on to think cyclically. So to get back to what you're saying about how that, you know, those things upset you, because it's like, well, what role do our leaders have in encouraging or discouraging us from taking care of the planet? Well, you know, as much as you don't want to talk about politics, I don't want to talk about religion, but I will say this. It always sticks with me when I think about, say, the 7 deadly sins, right? I think greed is really the only sin, because it seems to override everything. Everything that has gone wrong, and I'm going to get off the box in 2 seconds. Everything that's gone wrong
seems
to center on greed, and I don't even think that's a religious thing. I just think it's a terrible aspect of the human condition that can be changed. But you know, we live in a place of abundance. Why do we insist on doing a grab on everything from land to food, any resource that can be shared? I mean, I think right now we're living in pretty much the crappiest of times with, you know, everything being grabbed at, everything being commodified, down to the nugget, down to the scintilla of detail. And
exactly. You know, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
Another thing, as we were talking on this subject, you know, I know that I'm an older guy. You know, I'm 62, and God forbid, you know, I'm thinking I'm going to live a pretty decent life, because I did honor my mother and father. But I'm saying I've had some good years here. You know, was able to evolve into the person I am now. I think about little Diva, Aviana, you know, little Noah, my friend Colleen, who just passed away, her grandson, you know, little Ronan, my friend Jeff's grandson, and these younger people, and then all of these innocent people. It's like, what is the type of world that is going to be left when all these old fogies, with their poor thought process, and they're not true visionaries, to really kind of figure out a way, you know, to resolve things and differences outside of bombing up, you know, a beautiful country. That's just me.
Well, Glenn, may I address the cyclical aspect again to say that, unfortunately, and this is not to be a downer, it's just a reality check, that if we're going to think about things cyclically, there are people who are way younger than you and I who don't have what we deem as the most savory thoughts for how to sustain the planet. It just, you know, these kinds of ills never go away. So the challenge is, how do we, you know, dig our heels in or push forward?
Navigate through it.
Navigate, to not just survive, but to thrive. How do we look at language that we don't sometimes realize on a conscious level affects our day-to-day. And that's why I named this piece Everywhere We Are is the Farthest Place, because there's that sense of othering or isolating or decentering people. And I had gotten this idea from a wonderful gentleman who said, I really like this idea of your piece, that you're decentralizing the centered and unothering the others with this piece. And I said, that's exactly it, and you got it. So now I say that all the time now. I use that in my sort of, talking about Everywhere We Are is the Farthest Place. Another through line is that I've always been a big fan of space travel. And I'm talking about real space travel, not the faux space travel of,
going to the space station.
Who say, hey, for $1 million, you can go into space. You're not really going into space. You're penetrating the first layer. You're coming right back down again. It's basically like going to great adventure with $1 billion. And so real space travel and space exploration is about doing research, taking time to explore something, to draw the parallels between, again, sustainability. How can we live well wherever we are? But before all of that, as a kid, I'd always been fascinated with, just the whole aspect. I was a big Lost in Space fan, even though they were...
while you were talking, I was like, this is Lost in Space, like traveling the galaxy.
Yeah, it's totally Lost in Space. Well, so here's the really cool thing, is that NASA sends their astronauts in training to places like Svalbard, which is an Arctic desert. There are different types of deserts. So Svalbard's an Arctic desert. Then you've got the Mojave. Then you've got Joshua Tree. You've got these deserts all over the United States, all over the world. But they're subtropical deserts. There are Arctic deserts. There are polar deserts. I mean, it's very cool what this world has to offer in terms of places that offer extreme conditions and textures that mirror what's going on in space, particularly on the Moon and Mars, the two places where we've been able to land one way or the other, whether it's with apparatus or human, right? And so that's part of the training. And I'd always been, Lost in Space was one of my favorite films because, I don't know if you did this as a kid when you watched a show like that, but I'd look at my own family that were very tight-knit, and I said, I sort of superimposed my family onto the Robinsons and would imagine how would we do out there? I think we'd do well, and like who would be our wacky professor? Who would I don't know who would play that role in my life. Maybe one of like my father's colleagues who always came up with some whimsical, borderline harebrained idea, but in terms of just the fantasy of it, that also played into this whole thing when I was a kid of, I want to go in space, but I don't know if I can devote myself to that amount of time. So sort of the next
I tell you, maybe in another life, another plane, as we were talking about,
right.
What's beyond this,
Right. But this is where it all comes into play, is that the next best thing for me was to have this experience, and I plan on continuing having these experiences, because the next place I plan to embark on a expedition, if you will, and do this kind of work is a subtropical desert.
Okay.
And so, so that I can compare and contrast, and whatever comes of it by way of sound and, a creative product. I'm really looking forward to that next phase.
That next phase. Well,
yeah, in a sense, it would be an extension of this. But I'm totally into that parallel of space travel and the desert as place of loneliness and wonder and contemplation and seemingly separateness, when in fact it's not. Again, drawing to the title, Everywhere We Are is the Farthest Place. It really isn't, is it?
Well, let me ask you this question, because it's funny. This thought process I had about Andre 2000. He has made this. I call it, because I've been really into ASMR. Bob Ross did it, and I don't know if he even knew what he was doing back then, but I remember, being, in a hypnotic state, listening to him paint. So Andre 2000 or Andre 3000, I think is what it is. I'm saying it wrong.
Yes, 3000, yes.
It's like some type of flute instrument. And when I heard it, I mean, it's something that I could go to sleep with. I get it. And I was amazed that so many other people got it, because what that told me about that young man or older guy now is that he's evolving too. And as you evolve, you don't really stay in the same place. Like me, I'm always reaching back. I'm always reaching back for Swing Out Sister. The reason is because to me, they were just ahead of their time, and it's timeless music, and I do with the old Motown and, those things. And I just started getting into more of certain artists like her, that are bringing pretty good music that, has some thought behind it. There's this guy that played in, or is playing in, Anne Rice's reinvention of Interview with the Vampire, this black guy who I think is just absolutely gorgeous. But he is also an artist as well. And in listening at you, you are God. I know that you know how to play the piano, but how would you describe yourself? Because I say you're an accomplished musician, artist, but how would you describe yourself?
While I appreciate that description, one of the things that I always consciously and deliberately tried to do was create my own inroads within the practice of music and sound, because you say I'm an accomplished pianist, but if somebody said, sit down and play, a concerto by Rachmaninoff, that's my brother's forte. He can knock that apart.
Okay.
I'll sit there with two fingers and try to pull off Rachmaninoff, or, but we were both weaned on, Rachmaninoff. But my brother Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan Edwards, he can play that stuff. There's that funny line between producer and consumer, right? And I had, I'll never rest on my laurels and say, I've learned to accept that there are certain things I'll never be able to do. But there are things that, I won't fool around and say, oh, I'm adept at this. But I have a general understanding. I can hold a conversation with you about those things. But it got to the point in my career where I said, I don't want to get too comfortable doing the same thing. And I always had a love for the environment and a care for the environment. But how do I do that as a musician and sound person? And that is to keep digging those paths, creating those inroads in which I can make music as I hear it. And so with, say, Andre 3000, who I think he threw a lot of people for a loop because he was doing a certain kind of thing for a certain amount of time. And I just got the biggest smile on my face when I heard New Blue Sun, and I said, listen to this guy. He's pulling out the flute, and he's leaning into spiritual jazz. Like, you can tell he's got like this finger on Alice Coltrane, he's got that finger on Sun Ra, but at the same time he's doing him. Andre 3000 is doing him, and as much as his audience or the people who love him, including myself, but like I said, I wasn't surprised one bit. I was glad he did that because he knew, or he knows, that it's time. And it's time for this. It's time to go deeper. And a lot of artists are going there. I mean, Beyonce, who has she has wide popular acclaim. She's put her toe in it, but then again, so did her sister. With Lemonade. Not Lemonade. And that album, to me,
it was Pink Cranes or something.
I mean, that's some powerful stuff. And that I think we're all learning that the popular canon, as much as we like the catchy hooks and the chorus verse, the chorus bridge, pre-chorus pattern, sometimes we need to break out of the box. And with composing for and about nature and the environment. And I actually started doing that with architecture way back in the day when I first met you. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, what does that mean, composing for architecture? But then they'd hear my stuff and they'd understand that it can mean a number of things. Mm-hmm. But it's about paying attention to structures, whether they're humanly created structures or
by nature.
Structures that, done by nature. And then, and it's also wrestling with the language and trying not to create these harmful binaries that, humans are not natural. We are part of nature, but we're also conditioned and sort of somewhat controlled at times to be a certain way within nature when, in fact, I think we loosen things up a little bit. And that's where I feel like Andre 3000 has.
Yeah. Now, on that note, I'm going to invite you back for a part 2 because, I always made the shows like an hour because I said, okay, well, wherever it flows naturally. And you and I had no problem doing an hour show.
Oh, so, yeah.
So I'm going to definitely invite you back, and I'm going to re-listen to this to find out, where we left off, because you are one amazing, beautiful spirit. And for those who are listening, if you are interested in finding out and following Mary on her evolutionary journey, it is maryedwardsmusic.com. She is not only a friend. I was telling Heston yesterday. I said, I want to, because he's kind of like a Renaissance man when it comes to art. I said, I want to take another trip back to New York in that area. And when I'm there, I definitely want us to hook up and meet. But until that time, my dear, I will be looking at you on social media, and I'll work out another date for part 2. But I just want to say thank you for your kindness.
Oh, thank you for your Thank you for reaching out again. It's nice to sort of reunite through your show after 10 years, even though we've been in contact. But it's nice to sort of be here in this public space together to just talk. And if I can quickly add that Everywhere We Are is the Farthest Place is technically still a work in progress, yet in the past year I've performed it out several times. It's also been in the iteration of installation performance, and I'm continuing to do that this year. But in about a month, Polar Lit magazine, which is a publication out of Svalbard, out of northernmost Norway, is going to be publishing, this is a quick, beautiful story, is going to be publishing this piece. I'm going to be submitting an edit with a QR code that one can listen to, so you'll get a sampling of the work in sort of in a consolidated form, in a 3 to 5 minute consolidated form, which will accompany a poem written by another artist named Francesca, who we met in Svalbard, and she was inspired so much by our meeting that she named her poem "Everywhere We Are Is Now the Farthest Place."
I love it.
That's kind of mind-blowing to me. This just happened this past week, and I'm still processing the excitement of having that inspiration, being an inspiration to someone who, in fact, inspired me. And so we're going to be publishing together, so it's great.
Okay, well, that sounds wonderful, and maybe one day in the future, me and you will hook up and do something. But in the meantime, keep on being as beautiful as you are. And I say that from a spiritual, just from a spiritual place. Thank you for being my friend, and God bless you.
God bless you, and thank you so much for me and you connecting.
Oh, all right, love. Well, you take care of yourself. God bless.
I'm sending love.
Okay, you guys. What a fascinating hour. With 5 minutes and 45 seconds to go. I'm really enjoying myself this time around on season 7 because each and every person I have interviewed on season 7, their friendship and their engagement means a lot to me, and all of them have been so gracious in, honoring, being on my show, and I'm just grateful for that. And so, I'm going to have Mary Edwards back for part 2 of that because she is just one amazing woman. Now, on a final note, I just want to say, if the surrounding you're in, that means people, places, and things, nurturing you to grow, if, they're causing you havoc, don't be afraid to step out and step out, find other circles, because my life is definitely come full circle. So on that note, God bless you and thank you for tuning in to me on A Touch of Grace. God bless.
Thinking about retirement? O'Donnell Financial Group will help you make sense of it and build a comprehensive plan to fulfill your goals. Serving the entire Bay Area, O'Donnell Financial Group allows clients to take control of their retirement. Visit ODFIGroup.com and take O'Donnell Financial's complimentary risk assessment to see if your investments are aligned with your goals. Protect your nest egg with O'Donnell Financial Group. Visit ODFIGroup.com or call 866-496-2300. Investment advisor representative offering advisory services through O'Donnell Financial Services, LLC, a registered investment advisor.
The secret's oat for nourishing your sensitive skin. Start each day with Aveeno's Daily Moisturizing Body Wash to gently cleanse and help preserve your skin's moisture barrier. Then slather on the Daily Moisturizing Body Lotion for 24 hours of clinically proven hydration. This powerful combo gives you 2 times the moisture in 2 easy steps, thanks to both nourishing oat formulas. Get softer, smoother skin and shop Aveeno now at Target.